tuning in to the online broadcast network, AFTERBUZZ TV. Over 20 million weekly downloads in over 150 countries, and your number one source for after-show entertainment. AFTERBUZZ TV, the destination for TV superfans. Producing aftershows for over 300 of your favorite TV shows. Interviewing celebrities and showrunners. And bringing you behind-the-scenes exclusives. All thanks to E! Entertainment's Maria Menounos, producer Kevin Undergaro, and internet leader Akamai. Now, let the buzz begin!
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Reign Season 2 finale after show here on AFTERBUZZ TV. It is Phil Svitek solo today. We will be doing the Season 2 kind of recap with JB Zimmerman, with Keaton Markey, and myself next Thursday. But today, you get me, you get my thoughts. However, I feel like I'm pretty good at channeling the thoughts of Keaton and JB now that I've gotten to know them for an extended period of time doing this after show here on AFTERBUZZ TV. Before we fully get into it, if you haven't already subscribed, do so. YouTube.com/AFTERBUZZ TV, Facebook, Twitter, iTunes, SoundCloud, all these places where the content is available, and it's available for free. Let me start off by saying, first and foremost, this did not go any of the ways that I had predicted, that JB had predicted. Maybe JB had something more in his mind, but certainly from what he told me, it did not go that way. And I gotta say, I actually enjoyed it. My wish was to see, 45 minutes of all-out war for the throne, but we didn't get that, and it was okay. I did not expect them, more so specifically Mary, to do what she did in the first 5 minutes of this episode, and I love that more or less it became a very tactical episode, but so many tactics happened, and it wasn't. Yes, it was related to romance, but it was also very, very much political, and I rather enjoyed that. I really did. But let's start with we'll start with the lesser of the storylines and kind of build up. There's not much with Greer happening here. However, I have to applaud her because in past episodes, or in a past episode, when Mary says that, the for lack of a better term, the whores now work for the queen, it was such a great foreshadow of how it would be used, and I think Greer feels very vindicated in that sort of way, especially with what's been happening with Leith. And so for her to be able to offer up her services to Francis, indirectly, but obviously to Mary, in the conquering of the coup, it was a great moment to see. And I really enjoyed how this kind of came full circle this season, despite the exile of Greer. She may not have a place in the castle, but that doesn't mean they can't remain friends, and that's what they've shown. And it's no other way to put it. It's just great to see. Next up, we have to talk about Bash and Kenna. There's a lot going on there. It's always been a back and forth, and it's really unfortunate because one person is always behind the 8-ball of the other, and it keeps switching. Bash has secrets, then Kenna has secrets, Bash has secrets, and I thought tonight we would reach a level where they would both come to the same point at the same time, and to see that it wasn't, and the most heartbreaking thing is that I understand where Kenna's coming from. We've talked about this multiple times. As a female, during these times, you for better or worse, you just don't have many options. You have to be your perceived value is, for the most part, seen through the eyes of men. And that's, you gain your credibility in that way. And to have a child with Renault certainly does not set her up for a great future whatsoever. And she goes back to Bash for that reason first and foremost. However, I do believe that there was an inkling of wanting to get back with Bash for the right reasons, but just the way it came off, obviously, as Bash learned through Delphine that that she has a child and that this child is not his, it is in fact Renault's. It just realigned them it just separated out their tracks once again, and I don't know at which point they become inseparable. I joked about it, I believe, last episode with JB, but the fact of, as much as these characters are quote unquote ending their relationships all the time, whether Laith and Greer, whether Francis and Mary, which we'll obviously talk about, and in this particular case, Kenna and Bash, as long as you're in the same vicinity, as long as you have to deal with each other day to day, there's always going to be that chance to progress, that chance for meetings, that chance to reconcile, which obviously continues to happen for the most part with these characters. But the question ultimately will become, at what point is too much too much? And I think one of the certain kind of themes of this entire season, if you want to look at it in this way, is that we do things for love that don't necessarily make sense. This was highlighted last episode and the episode before that in particular, but it's been a through line throughout the whole season. And so with Bash and Kenna, is this the final straw? Can it be reconciled in season 3? That remains to be kind of debated. But we'll see. It's just one of those things. What complicates it is certainly Delphine in this particular instance, because here's Bash and Kenna who've made up, and he's ready to tell Delphine that, even though she has his support, and he's brought her into the castle, that he's going to remain with Kenna. He's gonna work things out with Kenna, and that's when she trusts the mom. We don't really see how kind of what he was planning to do with Delphine in that moment. Obviously, it's complicated simply because of everything that's happening with her, which I'll go into in a moment. But it doesn't leave Kenna and Bash in a good place whatsoever. Even if Bash kind of found out the information without Delphine, I don't know if the hopes would be good for Kenna and Bash in this regard. Certainly, things are progressing for Kenna. She has her king from what the region of Russia, the Baltic Seas and things like that. He's clearly way too young, and she obviously is very hesitant of that fact. She says to him, this will be interesting how it plays out, because she wants to bring her sister's child next upon kind of their next meeting, things like that. So obviously she's setting things up there in quite a way. And she's setting it up so it's months down the line, so that way he doesn't see her through this pregnancy, and then she can have the child, and then they can kind of begin their future, or kind of see it in that way. I thought Kenna was a little bit alarmed by the fact that she is being set up with a king. And number one, it's certainly a young king, and that worries her. But more so, I think it's the king portion of it, because she's dealt with so many kings. Or she's kind of been affected by, obviously there's King Henry, but even through King Francis, knowing how it's affected Mary and Francis's relationship and everything there, I think she is nervous for the most part, but she's going to go along with it, and ultimately we'll see kind of where that leads to in season 3. Speaking of Delphine, this, I think I've made it no secret that the supernatural element of the show, to me, I'm not the biggest fan of it. The good news is that, at least for me, they don't spend a whole lot of time on it. And the reason I say that is because there's so much more to the show. I think tactically and through politics and romance, how the show can go. That to bring in a supernatural element. I'm kind of not necessarily the biggest fan. What I do like and appreciate is that it isn't. It doesn't go into the realm of, let's say, True Blood, Vampire Diaries, the original, in the sense that it says this is real or this is not real. It kind of, much like in the time, it allows you to decide, okay, is this really just pagan superstition, or is this actual witchcraft and whatever else? And certainly, kind of things point in one way or another. You always get kind of evidence of both, but ultimately it's up to you as a viewer to decide, is this the way it is? And so I like that aspect of it. Now what happened with Bash? Could he really feel? Are they really binded? You could say that they are. Who knows? Again, that's kind of ultimately up to you to decide in terms of whether or not this power is real. I think there are people that could predict this stuff, but the point being, they didn't spend a lot of time on it. But in terms of Delphine, obviously, the princess Claude, she was, she had her superstition. She was very frightened. They immediately went to Bash. He was investigating it, and obviously Bash has such a weird history with these types of things, so that he's protective and sensitive to both sides. And the fact that Delphine, she's being burned, and she kind of escapes after that. Who knows where that's going to go. I think, I think a portion of season 3 will be spent on that storyline. And, I don't know. I would like to see, in terms of that, I would like to see for this particular episode, maybe they could have gone into it more, how it affected them directly. For this episode, it just kind of was a thing to deal with, and a distraction from everything else. Certainly the coup, but I'm not. That doesn't mean that it was a bad storyline by any means. It's he got to kind of set these things up for the next seasons, and that's what they're doing. So I can appreciate that. Beyond that, in terms of what I'm always, one of the reasons why I get, for lack of a better term, frustrated, but in a good way with these things, is because I want to know what ultimately she was doing to the boy. Where was headed, and that's the problem. As I said, you got to make up your own mind about these sort of things, and that can be frustrating because ultimately, is she good? Well, it does look very, very bad what she did with the maid servant boy. There's the symbol. He's dead on the floor and all these things. So it, from the looks of it, obviously doesn't look good whatsoever. Bash recognized that, and he's torn with it as much as I would say you and I are. So it is what it is, and we'll see kind of how it picks up in season 3. All right, so we're slowly closing in on the big storylines of the day. Let's start with, which, by the way, I love the switch from Narcisse to Stefan. When I obviously know when kind of the switch happened, but why, I don't know. I like calling him Narcisse. I thought it's a very fitting name of him. It's an exotic name, and I enjoy it. I don't necessarily like calling him Stefan. But nonetheless, he plays a major... What I liked about today's episode, I think, in many ways, he's a... For lack of a better term, he's almost like a... he's become a house cat, but he doesn't want to be a house cat. He wants to still... obviously his rise in power has kind of... He's been able to do things politically and things like that, but his claws, to a degree, were tamed. And now he comes out in full force, and he's able to save the day, for lack of a better term. He's able to really get out of the castle. He's really able to exploit his knowledge. He's able to act upon certain things. and be in the midst of the action rather than just calling the shots. And I think that excited him first and foremost. Really interesting line from him that he says to Mary, and I like that Mary made him confront her rather than having to go to Francis directly. I thought that was a very big power move. But in terms of Narcisse, him saying, I thought there was nothing worse than the hatred of Catherine de Medici, and through this he found out that love could be worse. And certainly that kind of a lot of the things that we're talking about in this episode directly correlate to, certainly the season, but more specifically what I love, the direct actions of last episode. When she killed his horse and fed it to him, a horse that he truly loved. It was a gift from her to him, and that's how it comes full circle. And so, for him, obviously very upset through this and very telling of the power of Catherine, and so he takes it upon himself to gain this knowledge and use it more or less to his advantage. Now, what happens with him and Lola remains to be seen. They made it visually as Catherine's kind of being exiled from this, to have Narcisse to directly look at Lola look at him, and they went from shot to shot to shot for quite a good time. It wasn't just a glance and then we cut away, next scene. It really, there was no, unless you were literally staring at the ground for an extended period of time, there's no way you could miss that, and I think that was the purpose of that. And obviously, I think Lola's certainly thankful, and that's why Narcisse did it. I think he did it for various other reasons as well, but interestingly enough, for better or worse, Narcisse has had the soft spot for Lola, and I think it's paying off for him, and we'll see how it kind of ultimately goes. But certainly, he was able to save a lot of chain reactions for Francis and Mary, at least from their perspective. Now, whether or not, in the grander scheme, the big picture, as they teased it, this episode was going to be queen versus queen versus queen. And at the time, we didn't quite, at least I didn't, understand what form that would take, what that would fully mean. But obviously, Mary is very much at odds with Catherine in this episode. And, it becomes, who do you side with? And you could do it from an emotional standpoint. And from an emotional standpoint, obviously, I would say the audience, me, myself, and you at home included, our team, Mary/Francis. However, it becomes a greater discussion of politics, of what is ultimately better. Kind of outweighing for the greater good. I mean, if Catherine is this much willing to hurt, the word's not hurt Francis, but to put him through this pain, however temporary it may be in her eyes, obviously she feels strongly about it. And so, you have to kind of weigh, what is she going up against? And now we've opened up that door in the weirdest of ways. To kind of recap just where we are, obviously Catherine is offering up Mary's head to Queen Elizabeth, which obviously she wants nothing more there. How that's going to take shape, who knows? Condé is out and about. Whether or not certainly I think Queen Elizabeth doesn't necessarily need him. She would have used any means to get at Mary, and Condé was pardon the pun, a conduit for that. However, he's still out there. How that remains to, what form that will shape, I don't know. It's going to be interesting. But in terms of Catherine, we'll see how this really comes back. I mean, we always say ultimately I don't know. In many ways, we don't see myself, Keaton, and JB life beyond just execution, and that's a credit to the show because they set it up as it has to be life and death. But obviously, Conde is alive, which none of us would have predicted. In fact, a lot of JB predicted that that Francis would have to go, or actually, I think it was more so Keaton predicted that Francis would have to go. And obviously that didn't happen. Well, neither did Conde. In terms of Queen Catherine, she's exiled, and how that's going to play out, will Francis kill her or not? And that's why, I think the death of King Henry in season 1 really set us up almost for what we thought would be a formula of how to get rid of, Narcisse. We predicted the only way this could work is Narcisse being dead, and yet the writers, and therefore the characters, are much more smart than that. They play things politically. They see things kind of more through how they can play out. And as much as killing is an option, there are better ways to do it, and I certainly appreciate that. Speaking of Conde, never in my wildest dreams, as I mentioned at the top of the episode, would I have imagined this is how things would go down. Within the first 5 minutes, she tells him that there's cannons. He strategizes utilizing this information, and through Greer, obviously we've kind of created like a fake plague, and that has destabled his entire army, and so much so, and she's kind of gained his and afforded his trust, Conde's, and then she literally stabs him within the first 5 minutes. He felt so betrayed in that moment, and despite all that, in the dungeon, as he says, he still miraculously loves her. But it was first and foremost what I loved is that it set up Mary in a very strong way. She's very much willing to do what she has to do. And I think it finally rectifies her relationship with Francis. She made her choice in terms of who she wanted to be with, certainly, which is Francis, and they've kind of rekindled that. But, I think what it certainly showed, whether the greater whole, but at least certainly the audience, that she's able and willing to do what she has to do when pushed. And we can debate all day whether or not the events of season 2 are her fault or not, or how it could have been fixed, and it's certainly not good. But it is what it is. And when she needed to, she came. This was an amazing plan, and she fooled him. That's as simply as it can be put. And the fact that Francis also was willing to not necessarily execute Conde, because he could have very much just done that. He very much chose to have him be alive and try to do this in a political way, which, as we just talked about, has led kind of Catherine to do what she had to do, because she's very much upset at not just she's, as much as she's upset with Francis's actions, she's much more upset at Mary's power over Francis, and it's interesting that way, because certainly in season 1 we've seen that played out, but it was very playful. And then they started they had this weird bond where, although they were rivals, it was very much they needed each other regardless, because there was no one else who would understand what Mary was going through, what Catherine was going through, and so they were able to relate in that way. And yet, through these events, oddly enough, and in some ways I was blinded to it, there is this huge hatred, and this is what it's led to, and there's no turning back. I don't know if you can turn back from that. So it is what it is, and that's kind of overall the season 2 finale. I mean, what I loved was that there was so many twists and turns along the way, as tactically, that I enjoyed it. It didn't have to be this Lord of the Rings, the Hobbit, Battle of the Five Armies type of battle. It could really be all done within the core, all done with words and the best ways. So that's what I enjoyed about it most. Let me know your guys' thoughts on the finale. I thought it was brilliantly done. From what I'm reading, a lot of fans have enjoyed it, and we're setting up season 3 to be amazing. I know we've kind of predicted Queen Elizabeth to come in season 2. Obviously, she came, but literally at the very end. So we expected her a little bit sooner, but I think we've set things up in a great way. In fact, you know, kind of tying into news and gossip,
AfterBuzz TV News.
CW had their upfronts, and Alan Kane was there. Obviously, the upfronts are. It tells us what shows kind of get renewed, what shows are, launched. We're coming back with Reign, obviously, which is great news. But they interviewed Adeline, and what I liked about her responses was, they talked about obviously the pivotal moment of the rape scene and kind of how she needed to prepare for it, and what she did enjoy, albeit it took a lot of prep mentally, was how dark this season went. I mean, season 1 was dark, but it was still fun. Season 2 got darker, and the consequences of everyone's actions. I mean, what I love is, even though we're seeing these people, it affects the nation, and so the heavier it can affect these characters, the more weight it has. And season 3 it's going to be exciting to see kind of where it goes now that Queen Elizabeth is literally in the picture. So I think that'll be fun, and there's no turning back. So I'm not going to get into predictions initially today. I promised you guys last time, and I opened it up with it at the top of the show. We will do a season 2 recap this coming Thursday, so look forward to that. It'll be myself, JB, and Keaton. So we'll kind of get into more theories about where season 3 is going to go. That'll be a large chunk of what we talk about. Obviously, we'll talk about favorite moments of season 2. But I feel like and we'll do an extended kind of cast corner. We'll catch up for lost time, because I know we haven't been doing that for a little bit. So and I know it has kind of become a fan favorite. So I want to make sure we don't rob you of that, and that we include that. Here's how we do it. Number 1, let us know. Go back in the comments. Let us know castles that you'd like to see maybe touched upon, some of your favorite castles that we can share with our fans, the other fans. So let us know, maybe, whether it's your favorite castle or your top 5 castles. Let us know so we can kind of go off that list. And also, let us know your favorite moments of the season, your favorite characters, whether or not they were just, here in a flash, or they're more reoccurring. Certainly, Narcisse is one of my favorite characters that was introduced this season. So let's make it as interactive as we can, and the way to do that is really, get in the comments now, so that way we can see these, we can formulate based around those. Thank you guys from the bottom of my heart, on behalf of JB Zimmerman, on behalf of Keaton Markey, and for Nia Thomas, and Matt and Megan from season 1. We appreciate you guys having been with us for a long time now, for such a great show, talking about such a great show. We really do appreciate it. We'll see you next Thursday.
From executive producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire AfterBuzz TV staff, we would like to thank you for listening to the AfterBuzz TV network. To watch or listen to other after shows and post comments or questions, be sure to visit AfterBuzzTV.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of AfterBuzz TV.
Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.